Okay, hello everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about the oddities in Genesis 9 that may not be that odd after all. This is sort of a response, maybe if you want to call that, to a video by this content creator who raised these issues. Now, I would like to be very clear from the start that I am not here to kind of necessarily object or refute or debunk or attack these views. Basically, the point is just that these explanations that I now propose, what's wrong with those? Why don't they count as explanations, but instead there are some weirdness that needs other explanations? That's my point here. All right, but let's move on. So there are four things. I'm sure there are other things in the video. It's just that there are these four things that I specifically wish to address. There are four questions. So here you also see the passage itself. I'm not going to read it in its entirety now, but I've highlighted with different colors the bits that kind of relate to the four questions I have here. So first thing is, so let me just briefly summarize what's going on with this passage. So it's about this situation where Noah has been drinking wine and passed out, and then something happens. He passes out naked, and then he has three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and it's Ham who goes there and tells about the nakedness to other brothers, and then the other brothers go and cover Noah, and then as Noah wakes up, he gets really angry at Ham, it seems, and then curses Ham's son Canaan. So that's basically what's going on here. And now the first question that I'm going to address is this foreshadowing of Ham's fatherhood of Canaan. So you can see here in the passage in green highlighted that twice before the actual curse, which occurs there on the purple line in verse 25, twice before that it specifically said that Ham was the father of Canaan. And this of course may seem a bit weird, but I'll get to that shortly. The second question is, why did Noah curse Canaan, not Ham? It seems like Ham is the one he got upset with, so why curse Canaan? Then the third question is, was Ham really the youngest son of Noah? Or what's going on with that one? And then the fourth question is, as you can see in the blue highlights here, it says in the first instance that Canaan would be slave to his brothers, and then if he's the son of Ham, then it later says that Canaan is the slave of Shem, which is his uncle. So is he going to be the slave of the brothers or the uncles? Right, but let's go to these questions one by one. And let's start with a clip of see what this content creator said about the first question.
Let's talk about some oddities here. First, before we get to the curse, we are reminded twice that Canaan was the son of Ham. Now, this is peculiar because the author is really foreshadowing something that's going to happen. You need to know that Canaan is the son of Ham for this story to make any sense.
Right. So, my reading of this is the foreshadowing of Ham's fatherhood of Canaan is that if you read the story as it stands and take out these two passages highlighted in green, and you come to the point, cursed be Canaan, anyone reading the story would obviously think, who's Canaan? You wouldn't have any idea who Canaan is. So in that sense, it makes sense to tell in advance who Canaan is. And yet you could argue that maybe not the most fluent literary choice to put it this way, but certainly if you don't want to change, it wouldn't make sense to put in the quotation from Noah saying, cursed be Canaan, the son of Ham. Maybe you could do that, I don't know. But the point is, if it wasn't for this mentioning it before, I mean, does it require to have it mentioned twice? Maybe not. But there seems to be a clear reason why that is done. That's my point. Right. Now, then, the second question is that why is Noah cursing Canaan rather than Ham? And let's see what the content creator says about this.
Why would he curse Ham's son instead of Ham? Canaan is the youngest son of Ham, but Canaan is not the youngest son of Noah.
So, of course, I do not know. I have no, probably, he's a scholar, and I am not. I'm just a layman, so he probably has better reasons for this. But to me, I mean, one plausible explanation is that if, as it is said in verse 24, that Ham is the youngest of Noah's sons, maybe the thinking is just that Noah feels upset with his youngest son, and sort of disappointed in his youngest son, and maybe because we know later on that Canaan is actually the youngest son of Ham, that he wants to pass the curse on. He wishes to put the punishment on Ham the same way that he will be disappointed in his youngest son, who is Canaan. I do not know, but maybe, I mean, to me this seems kind of a reasonable pattern that basically Noah's disappointment is related to his youngest son, so the punishment is to have Ham somehow be failed by his youngest son. Obviously, I'm just speculating here, but like I said, my point is not to give the most sort of necessarily an argument that this is what was meant. But the point is just that, you know, there to me seems to be some sort of an explanation which does not necessarily imply that this has to be some sort of a combination of different documents stitched together necessarily. Right. Now, then the third question, was Ham the youngest of Noah's sons? And this is interesting, so let's see what the content creator has to say about this.
But then we get to perhaps one of the weirder parts of the story. Noah says he knew what his youngest son had done to him. Now, in order to see why this is weird, you have to know that in the Hebrew Bible, when you list one's children, you list them oldest to youngest. That is the convention. That is what is pretty much always followed. Ham is not the youngest son of Noah.
Now, the content creator's argument is that there's a unwritten rule in the Old Testament that sons are always listed from oldest to youngest. And he does say, I mean, when I first saw the video, I just took it as a rule that that's the case. But then when I checked the video again, he does say, which is pretty much always followed, something like that. So there's a bit of uncertainty there. But certainly it's quite, he doesn't question this idea at all. This slightly bothers me that he just, when you have a text where the people are listed and then it says a few lines later that it was Ham of the three who was the youngest, actually that must be a mistake, and what is correct is the order in which the names are listed. This, I think, seems like somewhat unwarranted conclusion, especially if we think about probably one of the most famous set of sons in the whole of Bible, which are the sons of Jacob. And if we go to Exodus 1, the very beginning of Exodus, it starts by listing the sons of Jacob who moved to Egypt with Joseph. And in this list, as you can see here, here's the passage. So you will see after Benjamin, you still mention Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Now, the thing is that we know Benjamin was the youngest. Joseph was the second youngest. He's not mentioned here because he was obviously already in Egypt, and it's only the 11 other brothers that are mentioned here, but Benjamin was known to be the youngest. So this is a clear example how this rule is broken. Now the explanation here is that there were 4 different mothers for all these 12 sons, and here they are listed in groups by different mothers, and within those groups they are listed in from oldest to youngest. But now the thing is, of course, nothing here in Exodus suggests that this is the case. It's just listed like that. There's no mention that we are now deviating from this rule, which then of course raises the question, perhaps something like that happened also in the Genesis, and maybe it was the case that Shem and Ham had the same mother and Japheth had a different mother. Of course, now you would then say, well, no, I only had one wife, but we only know that from the fact that when they went on the ark, there were 8 people, Noah and his 3 sons, and for all these 4 people, their wives, which makes altogether 8. So perhaps Noah had another wife who was the mother of Shem and Ham, but then maybe she died before. And also, yes, you will start, I can already see that people will start saying that, okay, well, now you're just making stuff up. And yes, indeed, I am. But I think this is perfectly plausible that this is the case. And also, it should be noted that the Genesis does not really pay much attention to the wives of people. It's very patriarchal book, so only in few situations, like with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, you actually the wives are mentioned by name, but in many situations the wives are not really mentioned. I don't know. And like I said, obviously I do understand that this sounds like, well, I'm just making stuff up, but I don't think any of these explanations that I'm giving is particularly implausible or unlikely. But this could be my layman's view. Maybe a scholar will know better. The other thing I wanted just very quickly to mention is that speaking of Jacob's sons, Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and they are often mentioned in this order in the Bible, although Manasseh was the older one. Now, I think, to be honest, the situation is that when they are all mentioned, so that Ephraim is mentioned first, it's typically referring to the tribes or the land, rather than actually the sons. But still, a lot of times they are mentioned in the Bible, the younger first, Ephraim first. So that's another thing. So I don't know. My point here is that drawing the conclusion that because of the order in which they are listed, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that must imply that Japheth is the youngest one, and therefore these are some sort of putting together various documents and just left unintentional errors. I would just say that it seems possibly unwarranted. Now, the last question, was Canaan destined to be the slave to his brothers or uncles?
Also, it says lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. But then the text curses Canaan to be a slave to his uncles, not his brothers.
And this is, I don't mean to be offensive to anyone. I hope I'm not offending anyone. But this almost seems a bit silly to me. So here I have the passage saying that, okay, well, I forgot to highlight the first part in verse 25, where it says, "Cursed be Canaan, lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers." And then in verses 26 and 27, it's quite clear. It says, "Shem, and let Canaan be his slave." And again in verse 27. Now, what I would say here is that clearly, and I put a question mark there because, again, I'm just a layman. If a scholar has good reason to say that I'm wrong, then I respect that. But to me, it seems that here, like many other places in the Bible, Shem, Ham, and Japheth and Canaan are referred to more as their descendant peoples rather than the individuals, really. And you can already see it in this specific passage in verse 27 when it says, God makes space for Japheth. Why would you need more space for Japheth? I think it really means that it makes space for Japheth's descendants, the people descending from him. And then also, and let him live in the tents of Shem. So, do we actually think that it means literally that Japheth is living in Shem's tents and multiple tents? Somehow it feels more natural that it's referring to Japheth and Shem as the descendant peoples. And just to be clear, that literally would be my natural reading. And also, if we go back to verse 25, when it says that slaves to his brothers, it just means that because Shem, Ham, and Japheth are brothers, their descendants are also brothers in a broad sense. I've just took here a few bits, and I'm sure you can find many of these passages in the Bible. So there's Joshua 17:17, which says, Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, you are indeed a numerous people. So obviously, Ephraim and Manasseh, it's referring to them as numerous people. So clearly, they are not referred to as individuals. And by the way, this is also an example where Ephraim is mentioned first, before Manasseh. But like I said, it's referring to them as peoples. Another example from Genesis 27, where I think it's Isaac blessing his sons, Jacob and Esau. He says, so they were only the two sons, as far as I understand, and he's saying to Jacob, "Be lord over your brothers." Again, it's a plural, brothers, and I think he only had one brother. And then in the next line it says, "Your mother's sons." So again, I think sons doesn't really mean because they were just the two brothers, but I think it means the peoples. So I don't think this is really controversial what I'm suggesting here. And then one more passage from Numbers 32:6. Moses says to Gadites and Reubenites, which are again tribes of the Israelites, "Shall your brothers go to war while you sit here?" So this is clearly talking about the tribes of Gad and the tribe of Reuben. And it's referring to, I think this is very relevant to the Genesis 9, because it's referring to the other tribes which are then the descendants of the other sons of Jacob. And they are referred to as brothers. So I don't know, to me this seems like the least odd to me. And literally when, with the first reading, it just seems like, obviously these are talking about the peoples, or the descendants of these three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Anyway, like I said, these are just basically questions. My point here is to ask questions. Why on the explanations I have here, which seem quite natural to me, why haven't those been addressed, or is there something fundamentally wrong with these suggestions? And therefore, more plausible explanation is that it is just some sort of a combination of different sources, and things have been erroneously put together in a wrong way, left with these kind of problematic seams in the text or so. I don't know. Anyway, I hope I haven't offended anyone as always, and God bless you all.